watch these things. My cousin, he had a school friend, and she'd watched all the things that I'd done with you before. So I think I've got to do them all. I mean, obviously I will drive to you some of the times as well. And if we can just do them as like a series, and then I'll see whether I can get this thing published.
Well, away you go. We're running, darling.
Oh, we are, right. Hello, everybody. A most extraordinary thing has happened in my family, and my mother, to whom it happened in the beginning, has now died. She died back in 2006. And it weighs on me like a ton weight. And it is basically an approach from the other side to us. And don't run away with the idea that my mother was some kind of a saint, but if you've got to give a message to human beings, you have to give it through a human being. And apparently my mother was told that we have a sister planet. There are many, many planets, but we have a sister planet which was given their message, and they have fought off the evil forces which we are fighting with now, or at least I hope we're fighting with it, and they have turned their planet in the last 200 years into a Garden of Eden, which I think we would do too, given the chance. But at the moment, we have politicians, at least those in power. I think there are a lot of very good, kind backbenchers who really do feel that they are in power to serve. But I think that the ones who are in power at the moment, and I would say all over the world, are monstrous. Has there ever been a time that genocide, and believe me, it is genocide, has been attempted on all the people of the world? This virus is a complete scam. There is no virus, and I've been told that by at least 2 people who were highly placed in Pfizer. Anyway, my mother was given this message, or approached, put it this way, when we came back from Singapore, which would be at the very end of 1971. Don't run away with the idea that my mother was some kind of a saint. She was just as fatally flawed as the rest of us. In fact, my mother didn't want to know your problems. You could follow her around the house telling you, go away, you're giving me a headache. She really didn't want to know. She liked parties, she liked light-hearted things. She painted very well. I often didn't feel that she had an awful lot of empathy with other people if they were in problems. And she often misjudged situations and often didn't pick things up. I mean, to illustrate that, I would mention my grandmother's house in Taunton, which was the William and Mary house, which was a very strange house, actually. It had been probably a shop. So you walk straight in off the street, and the whole thing was sort of built backwards with an outside loo and the bathroom put on very much at the back. And to get up the stairs, there was a door in the wall, and then there were 3 bedrooms on the first floor. And the top floor, there was a door in the wall, and that room terrified me from my earliest memories. Quite what had happened in that room, I have no idea, but I remember going up to the room when I was about 3 and falling to get my teddy bear or something, and falling down the stairs. I was so terrified, particularly the staircase. I don't know, I sort of almost feel that somebody had hung themselves there, or some terrible thing had happened. And it wasn't until I was about 16, I was talking to my grandmother. We went for a walk, this was in Taunton, by the weir. And I said, I never knew how you could sleep in that top room. She said, oh, I know. She said, Mavis could never go there. That was my aunt. But she said I did see things, and then told me about this weird times when this horrible black shape had appeared. And she just closed her eyes and said, well, Grandpa was next to me, I was all right. But my mother had slept in that room. admittedly with my father, and she felt nothing at all. But even as a 3-year-old, I couldn't bear it. So we came back from Singapore. My father was in the Navy. We came back from Singapore in about the end of 1971. And I think it was probably about 1973, my mother suddenly had this extraordinary experience. And actually, I go back in time a bit. Before we left, we were living in Cornwall, and a gypsy woman knocked on the door. And my mother answered the door, and she told her a whole lot of things, and she said, you have great psychic ability. You will be called upon to use this ability, but it will never bring you any joy. And she asked to come in and to tell my mother some other things, and my mother said no, she didn't believe in telling fortunes, and she shut the door in her face. I would have had her over the doorstep so quick she didn't have time to ask to come in, but my mother wasn't into that. So we came back from Singapore, and she suddenly had this extraordinary experience. And was it a dream? Who knows? She said she woke up in a beautiful study with wonderful sort of antique furniture, and she was talking to a man in 17th century costume. He was wearing a blue coat and a grey periwig, and she said he had bright blue eyes, and his face was obviously a man in middle age, but he had no wrinkles. And she was sitting as though she was being interviewed on the other side of the desk, and this man kept telling her that she was going to be called upon to give a very important message to humanity, and she must do exactly as she was told. Do you understand? And he told her all sorts of things. Do you understand? And my mother woke up in bed, and my father had been unable to wake her and had left a cup of tea for her, which had congealed by the bed. And my sisters came rushing in asking for dinner money or something, because at the time they were still at school. And my mother was left feeling really shell-shocked by the whole thing. She was later told that she'd actually had an out-of-body experience, and that her body was not really capable of that. And that people on the other side had been fighting to save her. Some people had wanted her entity, her spirit, her soul, whatever, and others wanted her to go on living. And that if the people who've given us this message had been unable to overcome these other people, my mother would have just been found dead in bed. Anyway, she then found, apart from the fact that she was extremely shocked, she found that she was really stiff and really in pain. And she continued to be like that for about 6 years, until she went privately to a doctor who gave her a medication called Indocid, which did help her. But I don't think she ever recovered her former vigour. But I think that really the basis of it, she was always saying, one day there'll come a time when I will be very ill. And my mother had the First World War flu in her previous lifetime. And the First World War flu was actually poisoning from the First World War gas, the mustard gas. And it flowed around the earth on the weather systems. And anybody who got it and died of it developed Parkinson's disease. And my mother was one of those. So she had to come back and go into Parkinson's disease, which she developed much later, for her entity to heal itself. Anyway, a few days after that happened, this man came back again. And this time he had his back to her. He was still wearing the frock coat, and this time he was wearing a sword. And he was holding, I don't know if you can see that, but Miles has got another picture. I have actually got a watercolour that my mother did. And there's a little hole in it. But this man is showing, he's holding up a veil over a satanic face. And in the 70s, we couldn't really have thought of anything like that there was any satanic anything going on. And I think we had a different frame of mind. All these wars and terrible things that happen, we never blame our politicians. We never seem to notice that they can't agree amongst themselves. They can't agree with others from other countries. And these wars break out. And why should we send our young men to murder somebody else who they have no argument with? So our politicians generally, most of them, the ones who seem to get into power, they create war, dissension amongst themselves, and bankruptcy for the country, and unemployment. Really, anybody who goes into politics, do they ever think, I'm serving the people, I want to help them? We don't. So constantly, this civilization is constantly on the edge of war. And it's a terrible thing. I have not married. There has never been anyone I've wanted to marry, sadly. But how many women are the same? Because nobody knows anything about how to meet the right man. And we've lost so many splendid, splendid men who've been wiped out in all these senseless wars. And unfortunately, you carry the scar of bad experiences with you in your soul. And one of the ways that we actually make our characters, and we're all totally individual, is from our different experiences. And you don't realise that until somebody gives you, say somebody's written about you in a previous life, and you are told that this is you, and you read about it. My goodness me, it unlocks your brain. It's there. But of course you can't know all your previous lives. You can't carry it all with you. So most of us, it just leaves us, hopefully most of us are not having terrible lives, but we've all had some bad experiences. Anyway, so this man appeared again, holding up this veil over this evil face. And this would have been about 1973. And we couldn't have known that there was anything really evil lurking in the background at that time. Not as we do now. I went to a James Delingpole thing the other day up in Tufnell Park, and one of the first things he said, he stood up and he said, how many of you believe that we are going through a spiritual test? And I should say 3/4 of us put our hands up. All this thing about LGBT and paedophilia and you can be anything, and really upsetting children at a very young age is evil and wicked. And what the people who are doing it don't realise is that anything you do, any wickedness you perpetrate against your fellow man or against your planet, you will pay for endlessly and in a horrible way. And these incredibly rich men, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and Bill Gates and anybody else who has billions and billions and billions in the bank and does nothing to help anybody. What is the point of one very powerful life when you can do anything, have anything? Then you die and then you come back and pay endlessly. If they had any sense, they would be falling over themselves to help this planet. However, I digress. Shortly after my mother saw this man, she then was woken up in the early hours of the morning by lots of faces, really angry and cross and arguing. And she looked up and she saw what she was told was Jacob's ladder. And as far as I know, nobody but my mother and Jacob have seen this thing. So what it was all these men, and it is mostly men who are running our universe, some women, and they're arguing about how to give this message. We are on the brink of being utterly destroyed. Apparently Atlantis, which was our previous civilization, probably 10,000 years BC, we don't know, and the Lemurians, we don't really know much. They fell out, and wherever you have deserts, there's a lot of oil and water, and there have been cities and marvellous places. And these have all been destroyed by different wars, and that has all been lost in history. But I did hear somewhere that Atlantis was or the people of Atlantis were much more advanced than we are at this present moment. But they were constantly fighting with each other, same old thing, and that they turned very much to black magic and sexual deviation. And what is trying to be pushed on us now? Most of us are shocked by this, horrified, disgusted. But they're trying to persuade our young people, who are much more impressionable, that this is the norm for everybody. So they're feeling at the moment that possibly we've left it too late. But I think that if I can get this message, as they call it, out in any way I can. I haven't tried overly hard to write it in book form, because there's so much and I need some help. But everybody sits there looking at their phones, mesmerised. So hopefully I can do this with Miles's help, who's falling asleep in the chair over there. If he snores, I'll kick him. With Miles's help, I will be able to put it up in different places where people will watch it. Small chunks of knowledge, and it is really interesting. So my mother painted the Jacob's Ladder. There are all these people wearing the robes which people wear on the other side. And at the bottom is my younger sister wearing her new nightie. She was home so-called with flu, as the picture of human ignorance. And we are ignorant if we don't have the knowledge. So my mother at first, obviously after such a thing, this is a very huge picture which I've got in store. I can hardly lift it. However, Miles has taken it on his mobile phone, so he'll put it up so you get a better view of it. However, my cousin actually saw this man as well. She was my mother's older brother. You would say he had Asperger's now, I think. He was a very strange cove, and he married 3 times, had 3 children by the first marriage, and then had a series of wives. Nothing really lasted, and you couldn't really sort of get through to him. He's the sort of person who would imagine that you said something that's upset him and pay you back for it, and you were completely oblivious to what you said. But my youngest cousin, she had terrible asthma, and both her parents were awful. Her mother was dreadful as well. Left her at home with asthma, and she said she felt another presence in the house. And she had the blanket over her head. And then after a while, she was in this house on her own, and she felt so hot she couldn't bear it under the blanket anymore. So she pulled the blanket down, and there in front of her, sort of stenciled against the lamp, was this man wearing a red frock coat this time, so he changed. And he smiled at her. And she said he never said anything, but she felt that he knew everything about her, past and present, and that she wouldn't have an easy life, but she'd be all right. and he smiled at her and her asthma lifted. And then my godmother also saw this man. She'd been very unwell, and my cousin had, this is another cousin, had gone to his house in France, leaving his niece, who was a nurse, looking after Wynne. Then he heard that Wynne was still there, and the niece had gone off to Cornwall on holiday, and he rushed back, only for Wynne to be up and well, and said that this man in the frock coat had sat with her all night, and she'd woken up feeling much better. Anyway, he's never come to me. I'm not sure I want him to, actually. Anyway, so that was how it started. And my mother then found, she was trained as a secretary, and I would say her shorthand is probably about as near hieroglyphics as you can find, but she sort of understood it. And she took down all these messages from the other side in shorthand, and then typed most of them up, thank God, because I don't read shorthand. Although there are still quite a few books left, which maybe if I can get some help, I might find somebody who will help me to decipher them. But there is so much that she's left behind. I mean, if I just give you a brief glimpse of the, there's the introduction, which is these people explaining who they are. Then the beginning of our story, which I'm telling you now. Who we are, the givers of this message. A warning for mankind, which is telling you about what's going on with the planet. The organisation of the world, how it should be organised. The original plan for the Earth. And the planets and the humanity of the world. Peoples of the world, and what is important, and how all our races are sort of like a ladder, but all incredibly important. The importance of dress, reincarnation as it applies to all things, reincarnation of the physical body, and a little thing about Toulouse-Lautrec, the human family, creatures of the earth, birds of the air and the fish of the sea, birth and how the soul is put into the body, how death occurs, the horror of abortion, where we go after death, a letter from a father to his son from the other side, which is very interesting, the frog and how it will teach us about the formation of the human embryo, electrical systems of the body, hormone contraception pill, the frog and pregnancy, sexuality of mankind and procreation, old religious side. I mean, it goes on. There are about 90 different chapters, and most of them are about a page, not too long, but beautifully written and tremendously interesting. So what I propose to do, I was thinking that I would just speak it like I'm speaking now, but I don't want to miss anything out. So I am going to revert to reading these things. I mean, Jack and Ori worked, didn't they, when they read us stories? So I hope that this is going to work. So the people who are coming to us now, who are giving this message, they want to come and live again. They are people on the other side. They are people who've been there for some time, and they're sick of the other side. Everybody thinks they're going to heaven to sit on a cloud and be eternally happy and look at God. No, they're not. Human beings need to work. We progress through having a little adversity. And in every lifetime, we have other things to do and other things to achieve. So I'm going to now try and read some of these things out, and I hope that they will be helpful. And I hope that it'll be interesting enough for people to keep looking at it. So that's the end of this one now. So Miles, you can turn that off and we'll start again.